Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a classic. It's a saltwater reel. It's the Daiwa 955. It was 70s and 80s type of a reel. This one was sent in by Scott. It was probably previewed on that West Coast piece. It's turning very difficult, but one of the problems I'm noticing right away is that we have line trapped in under the spool there. So that could be a primary cause. But it could also just be that the line is trapped there and that we have old greases and oils. So we're going to show you how to take that apart, how to service it, how to clean it all up, provide fresh lubrication and oils, and put it back together again. And yes, your eyes are not deceiving yourself. I do have a replacement board on my table, and I've taken the board that I've had for over 15 years. And while it's on my wall of fame here, it hasn't gone far. I won't give up on that. But folks were telling me that it was getting difficult to see the pieces and parts. So we decided we were going to move over and try a lighter board here. And I hope that that helps with the video. Now we can tell we just got a complete bird's nest of a mess inside here. That certainly isn't helping the performance. And one of the things that's always of interest to note is take your line off when you service your reel. That's not because it needs a service here. This is a mess. I'm going to leave that to Scott. But one of the things you want to do is take your line off as you're servicing the reel, or rubber band it. Because if you don't, if you leave it in free spool, well, then what you're going to do is you're going to have the stuff eventually kind of tangle itself up. And then the next thing you know, it's inside the workings of the reel. And then, well, you got a bigger problem than maybe what you thought. So I always keep a bag of rubber bands on hand. And when something like this comes up, that's generally the best way to do that. You can try to untangle this stuff, or you can just kind of cut through it. Whatever works best for you. Sometimes you can just pull that little rotor click ratchet there off. And if you do it that way, well, it usually comes off quicker. But for now, we'll just kind of work our way through. As I'm doing that, I want to encourage everybody that enjoys fishing reels and learning about the mechanics behind them and how to service and repair them, a little bit of the histories of those reels and the like, to go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Because if you do, you'll see me working on all kinds of reels. And you'll get an indication of those reels that you may want to watch by kind of watching me service this. Well, I'm going to bring this up. It's not the tangled line that's making this kind of work awkwardly. There's something else going on in this reel. We'll try and figure out what that is. We should be able to pull this click ratchet off. Well, it could come off. What we'll do is we'll just leave it at that for a moment. We'll take it off from the underside. Let's kind of clip those for now. And we'll go underneath this. Now, this is one of those interesting reels that has two sides to it that can be removed. A lot of times you'll only have a single side that can be removed. And yeah, after that last piece, it seems to have freed up an awful lot of this. So let's take these off. I'm going to use a Phillips head screwdriver to do that. And a couple of things while I'm doing this. I wear a protective glove to keep the greases off my hand. I use a parts tray to put all the pieces and parts that I've taken off. And among other things, you're viewing it right now, but I take pictures along the way because those pictures help me to understand how the pieces and parts came off and how they go back together again. They show the orientation of the pieces and parts, and they also show me the structure of the reel, so that if I get lost along the way, I can go back and take a look and see what we've got going there. So here's the inside of it, and we can see that the primary cause for the performance issue is just plain old dirty grease. That stuff in there is going to be chunky, and we'll get to that in just a moment. I'm going to take the gear side off. When I take the gear side off, I want to make sure that I have the anti-reverse in the off position so that the rotor can spin backwards. The reason for that simply is that if you leave it on, when you go to push that gear out, sometimes that anti-reverse dog is going to hop. Sometimes the spring is going to loosen and shoot out. And when you go to reinstall, if it's on, well, you won't get it on set properly on the main gear. So before you go to take that gear side plate off, generally on any reel, go ahead and make sure that the anti-reverse is in the off position, and you'll save yourself some time and some future heartache. All right, here we go. We're going to take that off, and we can just see this is a real easy one to see on what the effects of just leaving a reel to sit around and dry on. You can see how that just chunks up and just has all kinds of dried grease and junk on there. So one of the jobs that we have here in terms of the restoration of the reel is to get all of that off so that we can restore the performance of it. With the anti-reverse off, we should be able to pull that main gear out. And you can just see underneath here, there's no reason in the world why this should have been left to the condition it is. We're going to use a penetrating oil, and we're just going to let it sit while I go ahead and take care of the rest of this. So a good squirt, and I want to come over and I want to remove this axle shaft, and I want to remove the dirt and grease underneath that, and we want to inspect the rotor and make sure everything is good there. So this is a mental note. This is a good place to take a picture. And one of the things you want to note is that the screws for the crosswind block and the gear are on the right hand side of the reel. You also want to note that the crosswind block is not symmetrical, that you have a tail end on this that seats down. And when you go to reinstall, this is real easy to flip around and put in backwards or upside down. Make sure that when you go to reinstall, it's seated in a down position. Now we should be able to pull that axle shaft up, push the crosswind block out, and we're going to do the same thing here. This is full of dried grease, so we're just going to let that sit, and then we'll come up top and we will remove the rotor. Now that's a deep cup here. You're going to need a ratchet wrench to do that, or a socket wrench. I keep a lot close by on hand so that when I need to go and do that, I don't have to leave my project far behind. So here's the ratchet. I'm going to try it from the left side, counterclockwise first. If that doesn't work, don't force the issue. Try to reverse the thread or the throw, because a lot of fishing reels have a reverse thread on them when it comes to that piece. We have a keyway. Notice that when that comes off, that there is a block where that little angle sits, and we should be able to remove the rotor. Pull that keyway up. We'll clean that in a moment. And then we should have a collar here now. Kind of hard to see because of the dirt and grease and grime and junk and the like. But there's either a collar or there's a C-clip or there's something that's going to be holding this bearing assembly in now. And that's kind of the next task, is to figure out what that is. That's easy. There's none. Sometimes even I get surprised with this stuff. So we have a bushing. We don't have a bearing up top. And that makes this service a little bit easier in the scheme of things. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the same thing that I've done with those other parts. We're going to clean them up. I'm going to put the greases and the oils on, or the degreaser, both sides there. One of the things with this lighter setup here on this table is I can't find out where the grease is, and that's, well, something I'll get used to. I had an oak board for years, and one of our viewers, I think, is trying to make me a replacement like that. And in the interim, Well, we switched over to what we could give a second chance to, which is just an end cut of a board that was laying around. And I do that for a couple of reasons. I like to keep that stuff off my workbench to the extent that I can. If I have to go hammering things and that, I don't damage the actual bench. And overall, it keeps the stains and the oils and the greases off the top as well. Well, you can see this is pretty much just caked on and dried, and it actually does require a scraper to get that off. I'm trying to land the broken greases and that onto a paper towel so that I don't transfer that to my next project. All right, that's pretty good. That one's cleaned. Let's go over and do the same thing now with the main gear. We've had that penetrating oil sitting on there, and you can see how much easier it is now. Once you let that penetrating oil sit for a moment, how much easier it is to just clean that off. And I can't imagine how this thing was working at all. We noticed it was bogged down, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that, well, the grease was trapping this little bushing here, for example, and that bushing wasn't sliding in that crosswind block. That's one piece. And then the grease in the teeth would make it a kind of a rough turning piece as well. So we're going to take a hard bristle brush and we're going to knock all the grease out of the teeth there. And then on the back side of this, let's get rid of this because we're starting to transfer those pieces. On the back side of this main gear, we have the same thing going because we know when we took the cap off that side plate that a lot of this was ingrained there. This is your anti-reverse portion here. That's not a gear that's driving the reel. But again, just like the other pieces, you want to get as much of this out of there as you can, because as you're reeling, if you're leaving it there, it can break free and, well, just damage the reel. It can cause it to trap in the teeth again or dislodge a spring or something. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with dirt and grease and reels. So take advantage of the time you're spending to service your reel to go in and clean that as well. I'm going to use a cotton swab now with that penetrating oil as a degreaser to get in there, take care of the rest of this. And we'll just wipe down this, and your main gear essentially is completed. I'm going to set that into the parts tray. Come over, just wipe down the pinion gear. There wasn't anything to speak of on that. There is a bushing and a washer underneath, so let's take care of that. We're going to do the same thing. When you do this, I failed to mention it on the other one, but when you do this, check the teeth to make sure that they are nice and sharp, that there's no dents or dings or wear on them. I don't know, it'd be kind of hard to find a replacement for that at this point. But get all that grease out of those tracks. Make sure that the gear is in good condition and that you're not dealing with any broken or missing teeth, because your reel will never perform well if those pieces have been broken. All right, nice. Clean that up. Bushing is clean. Because this doesn't have bearings, this little collar should get a little bit of greasing going on there, just to let it spin smoothly. And we also have this washer which goes underneath between the two. So let's put the washer on. Put that bushing on, we'll put that into the carrier. And so much of reel repair is all about this. It's about cleaning it up, inspecting for worn or broken pieces and parts, cleaning, re-lubing, and tuning it up. So getting it ready for the season. So this is the result of this reel sitting for an awful long time. And I don't know how long it's been, but it's years. It's not days or weeks or months. This one's being a little stubborn, so I'm going to go a little bit more with the oils. We'll do kind of a second coat on that. The paper towel business is going to be happy with this video. They're showing an awful lot of paper towels being used here. And we're going to just kind of see if we can't scrape this other portion off. Now, just the way that this is chunking off, I know that that's why this reel was not spinning well. And I'm trying to be respectful of the inside case paint. That's why I'm doing this in several passes as opposed to trying to do it once. The reel overall is a nice reel. It's, by tech standards, there's no ball bearings in this reel. They're all bushings. That's okay. And this reel certainly will continue fishing for a long, long time to come. All right, one more hose on this. Spray down both sides. We've cleaned all those pieces and parts. We're back here. This is the last part now that needs to be cleaned again. And again, we just want to get that old grease out of there, more of as a fail-safe so that it doesn't run into problems later on with the transfer of the old grease. But to the extent that we can get that old grease out of here, the much better it will perform. And then just make sure your anti-reverse dog is moving freely, and it is. For those of you wondering how this dog works, there's a little notch on this dog right here. You can kind of see the V. There's a portion of a spring sitting here. It wraps around the screw, and the other tag is sitting right here on this. So it kind of comes this way, wraps around, comes over, and tucks in under that wing there. All right, that's about as good as this one's going to get. One final coat. Just to wipe off with the paper towel here, that last little chunk or two. And then we'll just get it out of that sleeve. If you're interested in the art of reel repair, maybe you're working on a reel and you have a question. Maybe you have a question about the reel. Maybe you have a question about the repair itself. Maybe you're stuck on something. If you leave those questions in my comment section of this video, I will be happy to respond to you if I can, try and get you the answer. And I generally do that in the mornings. So if you leave a message and I don't respond, it's not for want of trying to get back to you. It's only because, well, my timetables are different than yours. Just stay tuned, and I do try to get that for you. We've just pushed the pinion gear through. We have the stud up top, and now we want to align the keyway with that block with the pinion gear. And that's how that will seat. Once you get that, there was a kind of a star washer here, serrated washer. And then we know that this one goes on in a clockwise manner. I'll tighten that up as much as I can by hand. And I want to make sure that I do not cross strip this. As I was just starting it there, it felt like it was cross stripping. And you want to make certain that you don't do that because parts are going to come fine. Here's an interesting one. This one is going to tell you that you have an anodized spool on it. The reason why I mention that is there's a lot of these reels made around the same time that have different brand names on it. But typically, if you find that anodized spool for corrosion protection, you're going to find that that reel was made by Daiwa, even if the name on the outside of the reel was something else. Okay, we're going to fully grease the extension here of that pinion gear. And then we can kind of continue with the reassembling now. We've cleaned up the crosswind block. I'm going to put grease into that. Remember what we said about the orientation of this. It's on the right-hand side facing down, just like we're showing here. There was a little piece of line I couldn't get off before. You can see the tangle there. We're going to get it off now. I'm going to use steel wool to remove any particles and any kind of roughness on the shaft. The shaft seems fine. I'm going to do a light greasing on the shaft. You don't want to do too much. It's only going to scrape off on the other portion of this if you do. Then we're going to insert the axle shaft through the pinion gear, through the crosswind block, and we're going to align the holes in the axle shaft so that we can put those 2 hold down screws back on. Those 2 hold down screws have little washers. Don't lose those. And I'm just taking a moment here, make sure we have it right. Just like the other one, I prefer to try and set this up by hand first. So this is one and there's 2. There's the second one coming. Just looking for the little lock washer. And we'll just load this. And get that one in here. Very simple design. There's only 2 points of friction here. One is the bushing that's up in the rotor, and the other one is the long sleeve acting as a bushing on the gear side plate. Everything else is pretty much contained, so there are no ball bearings. And this is pretty tight tolerance reel. Right. Just get some nice grease on the shaft. Come on over to the main gear. Again, the same. I get asked frequently, how much grease should I put on the gear? I put it in like every quarter of it or so. And I do that because you don't want to overload it. That's only going to throw the grease off and into the channel of the reel. And then the other side of it says that you have a situation where the grease from the pinion gear, which is a smaller gear, is going to help spread the grease on the main gear. So over a couple of turns it will do itself the best. Make sure that your anti-reverse dog is off. You can put a drop of oil on there. I know we've been working it with all kinds of stuff. Put a drop of oil into the anti-reverse dog, and we can go ahead and mesh this in. I kept the plates on different sides of that parts tray there because, well, there's 2 different sizes of screws. Easy enough to confuse them. One is a shorter screw, one is a longer screw. If you have them all mixed up in your parts tray or on your bench, well, the longer screws go on the gear side. Overall, this is a nice survivor. I didn't notice anything going on with broken teeth and bad parts. I did notice it's relatively clean inside and out. I think Scott, who's the owner of this reel, made a nice purchase. I don't know what he paid for it, but again, it's not one of these reels by today's standards where you're going to find 11 or 12 ball bearings, but there's no reason in the world why this can't catch as many fish as those do. And this was right before the graphite era came in, where reels started moving from the metal cases to the graphite. Then when you had the introduction of the ball bearings, and then you had transfer. This reel was made in Japan, I believe. You had the transfer to Korea and then on to China. So it's a statement of the times. It's appropriate, and it was a very nice reel, and it was the right price for those reels at that time. All right, well, we got one more screw we're going to put in here. Now I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to use some rod and reel cleaner. I'm going to use a product by Penn, rod and reel cleaner. I'm just going to try and get in here before I do anything else and just get some of that little greases and oils and dirt and the like that's kind of hiding in hard places to get to. And I'm just going to wipe that off. Give it a nice cleaning. This reel was stored somewhere where there was some spray from paint. And I don't know anything to get those little spray bubbles off without damaging the underlying spray. You can see it here. There's some spray points here. We're going to look at the drag washers in this. We'll try and service them if needed. And we're going to do that by removing the clip which sits in the groove of the main spool. That comes up next. That's your spring. And again, I'll put that into my parts tray just because I don't want to lose that. All of these washers have a little point on them that's going to ride in the shaft, so you need to pay attention to that. And then I'm going to grab my pick. I'm going to take these out and we're going to record the sequences of them. So that's the top one. These have leather washers in them. And these are flexible, so that's good. Top one, here's your middle one, which is also known as an eared washer. And we have another one. And the last one below here, I think, is just a fabric washer. It's the bottom of the spool. I'm going to just clean all of that out. That's the, appears to be the bottom of the spool. Yeah, because here's your last washer. Okay. Leather washers, I like to make sure that they stay flexible, and I do that by using a drag washer grease. This is called Cal's Universal Drag Grease. You don't need to use drag grease if you have leather washers that are that need reconditioning. Go ahead and use any fishing reel grease, but use a real grease. We'll do the second one. I dip it in the grease, and then I use the gloved hand as a tool to spread it, and I want to make sure that I don't over grease that. If I over grease it, the only thing that's going to happen is that the grease is going to squeeze out. These have the 2 points. This is the middle one. It's called an eared washer. That eared washer sits in the grooves of the spool just like that. And we have one more of the leather washers. And the purpose of the grease is not to make the washers slippery or anything like that. It's to keep the porous surface lubricated so that it doesn't dry out. All right, there's a little bit of some old dirt on this washer here. I'm just going to clean that up before we go any further. And then I'm going to take this washer and I'm going to align it with that other point so that when we go to reinstall, it's not far off base. That's the service of the drags. We finish that by putting the clip back in, set one side into the groove, kind of walk it around, get that other side set in there. And then push it down so that you know you are inside the groove. In this case, we're a little bit beyond the groove. I guess it's okay to be beyond the groove, but it's not okay to be above the groove. The only thing that is a retention ring. It has no use, no other function on this reel. Remember, we have a slot in the main shaft. That's what's going to mesh up with those prongs that were in the metal washers. That's on. Go ahead and tighten this down. I'm going to put a little bit of penetrating oil into the seams where the bail springs and arms meet the rotor case. And we're just going to work that in. I'll find a trip if I can. Make sure that it flips. And this one's in good condition. Last thing then is to take our handle, put that on. A little bit of a spray into the shaft for that handle. A little bit on the back end as well. Just make sure it turns easily. That just freed it right up. Okay, nothing left then to just test it. It's running fine. Let's make sure that We can put it into our anti-reverse. We have that. Make sure the baler's working. Let's just kind of go over quickly what it is that we did. So we took the whole reel apart. Every piece came off of this. We found that it does not have any ball bearings in it. It has a bushing and a long sleeve that acts as the bushing for the pressure points. We removed everything, found that there was a lot of old grease that was coagulated, needed to be scraped out of there. We took care of that. We cleaned and inspected each piece and part, and once we determined that there were no worn parts, we were able to just go back and re-lube, re-oil, and reassemble the reel. And this is what you have as a result. You have a beautiful Japanese reel circa the late 70s or early 80s. It's the Daiwa 955 fishing reel, and it is a very nice reel overall. Before we leave, I want to give a special shout out to our first responders and essential personnel, everybody that's been keeping us safe during the pandemic. Your efforts truly are appreciated. We thank you for that. To all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.